In my last video, I talked about the multigame, which was devised by one of my colleagues, the wonderful Pat Plateau. After Pat and I had been using the multigame for several years, I suddenly came up with an idea. We could write questions onto the boards. So I'd now like to show you some other track games that I've devised. This is the Have You Ever track. Now, before I show it you close up, I need to warn you. It's really good for children, but I'm very sorry, it certainly is not suitable for adults. But come and have a close-up look. And here you can see a bit of the Have You Ever track. And as you can see, it's got lots of half sentences in it, all starting with have you ever, like have you ever eaten, have you ever seen, and so on. However, the problem was this particular one. Have you ever had? And in a minute I'll tell you the story. But first I've got to show you how to play the game. So we take it in turns. So say I start and I throw a 2 on 2, and this says have you ever been to? So I've got to ask you a question. Have you ever been to Jamaica? And you answer the question and you throw the dice, and it's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Have you ever stolen? And you have to ask me a question starting with that half sentence. So I was going to tell you my Have You Ever Had story. I was in a junior school running an in-service training day, and I'd done all the input in the morning, and in the afternoon I'd put them into groups and given them a whole pack of activities to look at. And the idea was that each group would go through the whole pack, try out the different activities and see if they were suitable for their classes. Well, there was one group. It was the group with the head teacher in that did nothing all afternoon except play the Have You Ever Had game. And at one point I was walking past the group and I heard the head teacher turn to her deputy, and she said to him, she'd landed on Have You Ever Had, and she turned to him and she said, have you ever had an affair? Well, there was a slight gasp from the other people in the group, but he came straight back. I claim the Fifth Amendment, he said. Now you can see why this game is not suitable for adults. However, I was giving this talk to some university students at Leicester University, and a small group came sheepishly up to me after the day and they said, would you give us one of the Have You Ever track games? We'd like to use it at our party on Saturday night. So I said yes. Just one more thought about the Have You Ever game. You could simply get yes and no answers, like have you ever eaten squid? Yes, I have. Well, now that's good to start with, but actually you really want to encourage longer sentences. So actually you can then, after people have done that, then they can do longer ones. So have you ever eaten squid? Well, no, I haven't, but I have eaten octopus. It could be, yes, I have, and I've also eaten. So they've got to add to their answers of yes and no. That's true of all these track games. You can always extend the language. Well, as you can probably gather, I really like these track games. I do think they're great. Excellent repetition, really good interaction, very clear language aims, but no visuals to support understanding. So it's really important that we ensure understanding both of the vocabulary and the sentence patterns and the tenses before we start doing the games. But anyway, I'd just like to show you a few more of my fantastic track games. Here they are. Here's a bit of the going to track. And that obviously practices the future using going to. So what are you going to eat this evening? What are you going to do this evening, and so on. Here's another one, and this one practices the simple past tense. Did you cook some food yesterday? Did you sweep the floor yesterday? And again, remember, you can not only have the short answers, yes I did, no I didn't, but make them longer as well. Here's a much more difficult one, and that's about the conditionals. So what would you do if you felt cold? What would you do if you felt hungry? Here's a different sort of track. This is, as you can see, the book review track, and it gets children to talk to each other about something they've read. It starts with what happened at the beginning of the story, and so on. And here is one of my numeracy tracks, the takeaway track. Red to go, throw the dice, 3, 1, 2, 3, and this says 12 takeaway dice. So we've got 12 takeaway 3, 12 takeaway 3 is 9. There we are. Here is another track. This one is actually focusing on the language of addition and subtraction. So instead of using symbols, we've got the words like take away and add and minus and less than. I've also developed some photo tracks, which are excellent for extra revision for younger children. But they're also excellent for assessment right at the beginning, because rather than testing children, you can play a game with them and see if they can say it. All you do is throw the dice. When you land on a picture, you have to say, so it's a tongue, it's an ear, and so on. Here's another example, some plurals, socks, shoes, women, and so on. You must steal this idea. This game works with almost every lesson. So you throw the dice and you land on one of 3 words, what, where or why, and you must ask the next person a question starting with that word about the story or the lesson that you've just heard. This is one of the things I always carry with me if I'm going to be supporting children. And the very best track of all. And this is the blank track, and you can see you give this to children and say make your own game. And I must tell you a story about this one. I was going to observe Sue teaching, and I'd sort of just arrived in the classroom and she was just taking the register. And actually it wasn't a whole class, it was about a dozen children. And all of a sudden someone rushed into the classroom and said, Miss So-and-so's been taken to hospital. Sue, can you go and teach her class? So Sue turned to me and said, you don't mind looking after this group, do you, Gordon? I'll be back as soon as I can. And rushed off. And there I was with a dozen children I'd never met before. And of course she never did come back. I had the whole afternoon with them. With no preparation or idea, but luckily I had my briefcase with me. And in the briefcase, I had a dozen copies of those blank tracks. So the lesson actually was very easy. We were reading a book, they were reading a book about pronghorns, some sort of antelope things, which I'd never heard of before that lesson. So they read a bit in pairs and groups, and then they worked together to, in small groups to make a track game based on that. What they had to do was to write questions about the pronghorn book on scraps of paper, show it to me. If I approved of the question, then they could write it in the track, and then they played the game. And I mean, there was such a lot of work and such a lot of interaction, and then it was amazing. I was really pleased with myself, and no preparation, but don't tell anybody. Okay, so that's my quick introduction to track games. I highly recommend them, and please steal the what, why, the what, where, why game idea and the blank track idea, if nothing else, and enjoy it.